Good evening, I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska. You can get updates to your forecast or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories for your area. You can also call our weather info line at 1-800-472-0391. You can get updates to the forecast through that means as well. And you can email me at the address at the bottom of the screen, david.kramer@noaa.gov. Starting off, we'll take a look at the advisory that we do have out. That is for the southeastern portion of the Brooks Range. This is a winter weather advisory for snow and blowing snow. We are expecting snow amounts from 2 to 4 inches with localized amounts up to as high as 6 inches possible. Now, this is in effect until 10 a.m. on Friday and is currently in effect now. We are also going to have some winds up to as high as 35 miles per hour that could cause those blowing snow conditions. And for that blowing snow especially, that does include the Dalton Highway. So if you do plan on traveling up through that area, be mindful that there will be some blowing snow conditions that could reduce visibilities down to as low as a half mile at times. This is again going to last until Friday morning at 10 a.m. There will be some snow areas up further to the north in the northeastern portions of the Brooks Range, as well as eastern portions of the Arctic coast as well. However, the only one that should see amounts as high as potential advisory criteria of up to 6 inches is going to be in the southeastern portions of the Brooks Range. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery, we'll start off near the Gulf of Alaska, where we have multiple weaker lows moving through the area that are bringing a lot of cloud cover and rain to areas all around the Gulf coastline, to include the Panhandle area. As we look up over the interior, we can see some stalled out cloud cover extending out over that eastern portion of the Brooks Range. It's helping to bring that snow to the area, resulting in those areas that could get as high as 6 inches once again. So look out over the Bering Sea. We have a couple of weak lows moving through the western portion of the Bering Sea, bringing cloud cover down out over the western Aleutian Islands as well as the central Aleutians. And then finally, as we watch this one more time, we can see the northerly flow out over the eastern portions of the Bering Sea, bringing in some shower activity to those areas, bringing rain showers down through much of the area. As we look at our weather for the remainder of the day, we can stay out with that northerly flow out over the Bering, where we do have those rain showers covering much of the Bering Sea, the Aleutian Islands, and the Alaska Peninsula. Now, as we get over the west coast of the state, primarily those showers will stay just off the coastline. That's going to extend up through all of the west coast and transition over to a rain-snow mix as we get along the northwest coast of the state. Out over mainland Alaska, however, we are going to see some rain throughout the south central area as we have multiple lows moving through the Gulf of Alaska, as well as Kodiak Island and down in the Panhandle area. Pushing up north in mainland Alaska, central and eastern portions of the interior are expecting to see rain through the remainder of the day, and that's going to transition over to rain-snow mix and eventually snow as we get into the Brooks Range and along the eastern portions of the Arctic coast. As we move into the nighttime hours, we are going to see this snow expanding out through all of the Arctic coastline and then throughout areas of the Brooks Range as well, down into central and eastern locations of the interior. Should get cold enough to see a lot more snow in a lot of areas throughout the interior. Some of the low-lying areas may see a rain and snow mix. And then further out to the west, going to stay away from the precipitation, but we'll see some fog in the area developing overnight, especially in the low-lying areas. Out further to the west, we're going to once again see showers just off the coastline of the west coast, a rain and snow mix from the Point Hope area down through St. Lawrence Island, and then rain throughout much of the Bering Sea, Aleutian Islands, and Alaska Peninsula. We do have our other low out over the western Bering, pushing further to the south with some colder air behind it, but not cold enough to transition the rain showers over to snow at this time. Out over the Gulf of Alaska area, we have our low in the western portions of the Gulf, bringing rain throughout Kodiak Island area through much of south central Alaska and down into the Panhandle. Heaviest rain with this low is going to be along the North Gulf Coast and Panhandle areas. As we move into Friday, that low is going to continue to stay out over the western portions of the Gulf of Alaska, bringing more rain to areas from south central, Kodiak Island, and the Panhandle area. We do have in some of those areas, at the higher elevations, we are going to see some snow in the mountains. But then as we move into the interior, central and eastern locations, expecting to see some rain, and it's transitioning over to snow as we get into the Brooks Range and the Arctic coastline. However, some of the areas of the Arctic coastline will be warm enough to see a rain and snow mix. As we drop down the west coast, we're going to have those showers staying just off the coastline, down through St. Lawrence Island area, and through much of the Bering Sea, Aleutian Islands, and Alaska Peninsula. We are going to see our low out over the far western portions of the Bering, continuing to drop further to the south, bringing a little bit heavier rain for the western Aleutians on Friday. Then on Saturday, we're going to have more of that northerly flow out over the Bering Sea, resulting in more rain showers for the area as well as down in the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. However, although that was over the western portions of the Gulf of Alaska, will have pushed closer towards the Bering Sea, bringing some rain back to the southwestern portions of the state, as well as continuing to bring rain for the Alaska, for Kodiak Island area, for south central Alaska, and down in the Panhandle area. Some lighter showers are going to linger throughout the interior portions of the state, especially central and eastern, and then we'll still see some snow in the Brooks Range and a rain and snow mix along the Arctic coast. Now you can also notice when we look way to the south of Kodiak Island, we have a new system coming up. This system is going to bottom out in the Gulf of Alaska, bringing some stronger winds starting Saturday night and into Sunday. On Sunday, we do anticipate this low to bring some storm force winds to areas of the the Gulf of Alaska, as well as some heavy rain expected for the Panhandle area with a strong push of southwesterly flow out over the area, pulling up that moisture from the North Pacific. Then for our low temperatures, we'll start on Friday morning, staying out in the Panhandle area. We do have temperatures dropping down into the mid-40s at northern locations, and in the upper 40s for areas further to the south, with Sitka getting down to 49 degrees, and Yakutat down to 43. For south central Alaska, temperatures are going to drop down into the 40s, warmer as we get near to the water, with Homer dropping down to 47 degrees. And then as we look into areas of the Copper River Basin, temperatures are going to drop down to near freezing, down to 33 degrees at Glen Allen. And the interior portions of the state, temperatures are going to drop for the most part below freezing. One of the exceptions is going to be Fairbanks, staying at 34 degrees, but dropping down into the 20s as we get to western locations of the interior. Some of those colder temperatures are going to extend up further to the north and through the pass. We're going to drop down to 16 degrees through the pass and into the 20s for the Arctic coastline. As we move down the west coast of the state, right around freezing for many of the locations around the Kotzebue Sound area. However, Kotzebue itself will drop down to 27 degrees. Around the Norton Sound area, right around freezing as well, with the St. Lawrence Island area dropping down to 34 degrees at Gamble. Down in southwest Alaska, into the 30s for most locations. Macoriac staying a little bit warmer, only dropping down to 41 degrees. Then mid-30s for much of the Bristol Bay area, with the exception of Iliamna, only getting down to 40 degrees. For the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian Islands, dropping down into the lower 40s. A little bit warmer for Shemya, getting down to 44 degrees, and 41 expected low for St. Paul. Friday afternoon highs, temperatures in the Aleutian Islands going to get up into the mid-40s, as well as for the Pribilof Islands. Mid to upper 40s expected for the Alaska Peninsula, but back to the mid-40s for the Bristol Bay area, with Dillingham getting up to 45 degrees and King Salmon up to 44. Lower to mid-40s expected for the YK Delta and extending up in through much of the remainder of southwest Alaska and into the interior. In the interior, we are expecting temperatures primarily in the mid-40s. However, Galena going to stay a little bit colder, only getting up to 41 degrees. Around the Norton Sound area, right around 40 degrees is expected, and upper 30s for the Kotzebue Sound. Up along the Arctic coastline, getting just above the freezing mark in those mid-30 range. Through the pass, still going to be colder, only getting up to 25. Down in the south central area, getting up into the lower 50s, with some areas like Talkeetna getting up a little bit warmer, up to 58 degrees. However, some areas like Seward staying a little bit cooler, only getting up to 49. Down in the Panhandle area, temperatures getting up into the mid-50s, with Juneau getting up to 54 degrees. Moving into Saturday morning for the low temperatures, dropping down into the mid-40s for all of the Panhandle area. For south central Alaska, dropping down into the lower to mid-40s for the most part. A little bit cool, or a little bit warmer there at Middleton Island, getting down to 49 degrees. And for Kodiak City, down to 39 degrees. As we move into the interior, dropping down to right around freezing for central and eastern locations, and then in the 20s as we push into the western interior and out through much of the Norton Sound area, getting down to right around freezing, or some locations like Nome getting down right around 30 degrees. Kotzebue Sound area staying just above freezing, with the exception of Kotzebue getting down to 29. Along the Arctic coastline, upper 20s are expected, with some locations getting to right around 30 degrees. Dropping down to southwest Alaska and the YK Delta, mid-30s are expected for those lows, and then upper 30s to right around 40 degrees for the Bristol Bay area. Down through the Alaska Peninsula, Aleutian Islands, and Pribilof Islands, low 40s are expected. Saturday afternoon highs getting up into the mid-40s for the Aleutian Islands, Alaska Peninsula, and the Pribilofs. And then for the Bristol Bay area, also going to be in the mid to upper 40s, mid-40s for much of southwest Alaska, extending up into the western interior, and then getting into the 50s for the central and eastern locations of the interior, with 51 for Delta Junction and for Fairbanks. As we move out to the Seward Peninsula area, right around 40 degrees is expected. And then up along the Arctic coastline, getting up just above the freezing mark. Down in south central Alaska, mid-50s are expected. And then lower to mid-50s for the Panhandle area as we move into Saturday afternoon, with Haines and Skagway up to right around 53 degrees, as well as at Yakutat.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
For aviation, we'll start off with a look at our flying weather. Out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, widespread MVFR and IFR conditions are expected. Much of the west coast, however, should be VFR until we get up by the Kotzebue Sound area, where we'll start to see some MVFR conditions, and then MVFR and IFR all along the Arctic coastline. Down through much of central and western portions of the interior, we're going to see some MVFR and IFR as well, and through much of south central Alaska. However, some of the low-lying areas around northern Cook Inlet should remain VFR. Down in the Panhandle area, MVFR conditions are expected, while IFR conditions are out over the Gulf of Alaska. In Friday afternoon, going to see MVFR conditions throughout the Panhandle, with some areas of IFR out over the Gulf, and some MVFR conditions along the North Gulf Coast until we get to the eastern Kenai Peninsula, where more IFR conditions are expected. MVFR conditions at higher elevations in south central Alaska with low-lying areas seen primarily VFR. And then in the interior, central and eastern portions going to see a mixture of VFR and MVFR, and then more VFR conditions as we get further to the west and along much of the west coast. However, as we get to the Brooks Range, MVFR conditions are expected, and then IFR conditions for the north slope. Down in the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, central area is going to see primarily MVFR, and then western area is going to see primarily IFR. Into Saturday morning, still going to see some IFR conditions out over some of the central and western portions of the Aleutians and Bering, but a lot of MVFR as well. As we get to southwest coastline, primarily VFR conditions, but then we're going to start to see a lot of MVFR and IFR as we move closer towards south central Alaska and down in the Gulf of Alaska. Up in the interior, primarily MVFR conditions with some areas of IFR, and then IFR through the Brooks Range and Arctic coastline. Down in the Panhandle area, IFR should encompass all of the areas Saturday morning. However, as we move into Saturday afternoon, those IFR conditions should clear up to MVFR conditions, with the exception of the Yakutat area that will stay down in IFR. Then the remainder of the North Gulf Coast will also stay in IFR conditions. However, Kodiak will have broken out and see VFR conditions. MVFR for much of the higher elevations of the rest of south central Alaska. Once again, though, we're going to see some VFR conditions in the low-lying areas. Through much of the interior and down into southwest Alaska, a lot of MVFR conditions, but some isolated areas of VFR are expected. MVFR through the Brooks Range and a mixture of MVFR and IFR along the Arctic coastline. Into the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, primarily MVFR, but there is going to be an area of IFR for the central and western Aleutians. Looking through the passes, AKwx should be IFR then improving to MVFR on Friday, as well as at Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill should both be IFR throughout the day Friday. Raining will start off IFR and then improve to marginal conditions in the afternoon, as well as at Windy Pass. Isabel 2 will start off IFR, improving to MVFR in the afternoon. Mentasta similarly will be IFR, improving to MVFR. Dehne Pass also going to be IFR, improving to MVFR, and Portage once again will be IFR, improving to marginal conditions in the afternoon. Chilkoot and White should both be MVFR throughout the day Friday. Taking a look at our freezing levels, we have some of that colder air stretching down into southwest Alaska with the surface freezing line moving through the Bethel area Friday morning. However, some areas of warm air still lingering around the Panhandle area with freezing levels up to as high as 6,000 feet around the Panhandle. For our icing areas along the North Gulf Coast down into the Panhandle area, above 7,000 feet are expected. Into the interior, above 5,000 feet, and then below 10,000 all along the Arctic coastline. A lot of low-level moisture up there, and still cold enough to see that whole column below zero. Then as we look down into the Bering Sea, with some of the showers coming in with those northerly winds, isolated areas of above 3,000 feet are expected. That will be intermittent at times, but it does encompass quite a bit of area with all of the showers that we will see. For our jet stream, strongest portion of the jet is well south of our area. You're going to see one area getting up to as high as 140 knots, well south of the Panhandle. Out over the state, just some lighter southwesterly winds up to as high as about 40 knots out over northwest Alaska, and then around 70 knots out over the central and eastern Aleutians. At 9,000 feet, mainland Alaska, pretty weak with the winds, as well as at the Panhandle. There's going to be some northwesterly winds, 30 knots through the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, and then some areas of up to as high as 40 knots near the western Aleutians out of a northerly direction, and one other area by St. Lawrence Island, northerly winds 25 knots expected. Down to 3,000 feet, a little bit stronger over the mainland, northeasterly winds 35 knots out over much of the Arctic coastline and down to northwestern coast area. Down in southwest Alaska, 30 knots out of a north to northeast direction, becoming more northwesterly through the Alaska Peninsula, still at 30 knots. An area of winds out of the north around 35 knots for the western Aleutian Islands, and then some winds in the inside waters of the Panhandle, 20 knots out of a southeasterly direction. Turbulence for the Alaska Peninsula below 4,000 feet, St. Lawrence Island below 3,000 feet, western Brooks Range below 4,000 feet, and below 3,000 feet for the western Aleutians.
Stop, drop, and roll in a pile of leaves, stargazers. It is fall, and I am Trace, your neighborhood star nerd, and this week is the fall equinox. The equinox happens because of the orbit of the Earth around the sun, plus its precession or wobble of the planet on its axis. Equinox literally means equal night, equinox. The length of the night is equal to the length of the day. 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. That equality is used to mark the beginning of the fall season. This is a great chance to observe our closest star, the sun. Today, the sun will rise directly and exactly due east and set directly and exactly due west. If you have a perfect east-west road in your town, snap a photo for your Insta, because today it'll be perfect. Tag us if you do, grab something pumpkin flavored, go outside, and keep looking up.
We're at Vandenberg Air Force Base. We're about 20 minutes before the launch of ICESat-2. You might see the white light off in the distance. That's the Delta II rocket.
It kind of feels like an idea that was always going to just stay an idea. But no, it's real. It's sitting on top of the rocket.
You know, and for me, it's kind of surreal. Like you say, it's been 10 years, and it's hard to believe. It's like, we're really here? This is really about to happen? It's totally cool.
This is Dr. Tom Newman. Over the years, his work has taken him to some pretty remote areas to study changes in the ice regions of our planet. And his research, among many others, has defined the goals of the new NASA satellite, the Ice, Cloud, and Land Elevation Satellite 2, or ICESat-2.
And we have ignition.
The story of ICESat-2 really begins with ICESat-1. ICESat told us all kinds of cool things about the ice sheet and about sea ice that we didn't really know to ask. That data allowed us to measure elevation change of ice sheets in a way that we hadn't been able to before, and showed that all the action on the ice sheets, the places that were really changing quickly, were around the edges. So when we were thinking about what could we do better next time, we knew that was one key component.
In addition to the edges of the ice sheets, ICESat-2 needed to measure a dimension of sea ice that remained elusive: its thickness. To figure out how thick sea ice is, you can measure the height of ice sticking out of the ocean, or freeboard, and compare it to the height of water between the sea ice flows, called leads.
The problem is, sea ice is really dynamic, and those cracks open and close various places in the ice pack throughout the day, throughout the year, and what we need to do is have measurements of the ocean whenever it's available, wherever it occurs in the sea ice pack.
To solve that problem, ICESat-2 was designed with a fast pulsing laser instrument to take precise, near-continuous measurements across its 3 pairs of beams. For 10 years, everything about the mission was designed to measure rapid changes in the most rapidly changing part of the cryosphere. But it has to get into space first.
But it's a huge transition going from the ground to in space. We've spent better part of 10 years, thousands of people have been involved, and actually seeing the rocket there on the pad with all of that work kind of all put together in one place, it's pretty amazing. And then getting up in the middle of the night to go watch the actual launch, it's sort of surreal in a way, because you've put so much time into it for so long, and actually seeing it over there is like, whoa, you know, it's a big deal.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Lift off. Lift 1.
there it went. That was Atlas. The last Delta II, heading on out. So Atlas has been turned on over the course of the first few weeks of the mission, really culminating for us with a laser. So this is our first look at sea ice data from ICESat-2, and it looks fantastic. The signal levels look great. We've got plenty of photons there. We're capturing ridges. We can clearly see the ocean. All sorts of cool stuff in there, and this is just our first data. It's only going to get better from here on out.
The data from ICESat-2 is well on its way into digging deeper into the unknown dimensions of sea ice sheets, and glaciers. It will shed light on changes in sea level and global weather patterns, and once again find new things about ice we didn't know to ask.
So my heart is definitely racing. I don't know about anyone else's. This is the stuff nerds dream of.
Slight chance the flight may see ICESat-2 in their center windscreen. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to the marine section. We'll start off with a look at our ice edge. It does appear that we have reached sea ice minimum, as we have new ice growth now in the Beaufort Sea and the Chukchi Sea, but otherwise our navigational waters still remain ice-free. Down in the southeastern portions of the state on Friday, we have southeasterly winds 10 to 15 knots in the inside waters. Out over the Gulf, in the far eastern portions of the Gulf, westerly winds 15 knots, quickly becoming northerly 15 and eventually southerly 15 and eventually southeasterly 15 as we move further to the north, and then increasing with speed as we get closer towards Yakutat, towards 25 knots, and then dropping back down to 20 knots in the northern Gulf. On Saturday, in the inside waters, southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, strongest in the more southern areas. Out over the Gulf, south to southeast winds 20 knots in all locations. Seas are going to be highest in the eastern Gulf at around 11 feet. On Friday for south central Alaska, easterly winds 15 to 20 knots out over the Gulf waters till we get by the Barren Islands area, where we have north to northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. In the Prince William Sound area, northeasterly winds 15 knots are expected, and northerly winds 15 knots in Cook Inlet. On Saturday in Cook Inlet, northeasterly winds 20 to 25 knots are expected. Northerly winds 15 knots west of the Barrens, but southerly winds 15 knots east of the Barren Islands. Out over the rest of the Gulf of Alaska, southeasterly winds 20 to 25 knots, and then in the Prince William Sound area, easterly winds 25 knots expected. Friday for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island area, northwesterly winds 15 to 20 knots on the Bering side, northwesterly winds 25 knots on the Pacific side. On the east side of Kodiak Island, westerly winds 25 knots, and in Shelikof Strait, northwesterly winds 15 knots. For Saturday around Kodiak Island, west to southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, and then north to northwest winds around the peninsula 10 to 15 knots are expected. For Friday for the Aleutian Islands, starting off with the eastern Aleutians, westerly winds 15 to 20 knots, becoming more light and variable as we move further to the west until we get to the central Aleutians, where northeasterly winds 10 to 20 knots are expected, and then northwesterly winds 15 to 25 knots as we approach the western Aleutians. On Saturday, flow out by the western Aleutians, northerly winds 20 to 30 knots, strongest as we get further to the west, and seas up to as high as 13 feet. For the central Aleutians, northerly winds 15 to 20 knots, and then northeast to north winds for the eastern Aleutian Islands 15 to 20 knots expected. Along the west coast of the state, northerly winds 20 to 25 knots up north, dropping down to 15 to 20 knots closer to Nunavik Island. Out by St. Matthew Island, northerly winds 25 knots, and by the Pribilof Islands, southeasterly winds 10 knots. On Saturday, along the west coast, northerly winds are expected 20 to 30 knots up north, 15 to 20 knots by Nunavik Island, northerly winds 25 knots by St. Matthew Island, and northerly winds 25 knots also by the Pribilof Islands. Seas up to as high as 8 feet, highest off the coastline. Friday, along the Arctic coast, east to northeast winds 20 knots are expected, becoming more northerly down the west coast and increasing to up to 25 knots, seas around 8 feet closest to the strait. On Saturday, along the Arctic coastline, easterly winds 15 to 20 knots, becoming more northerly once again down the west coast and increasing in speed to 25 to 30 knots, strongest by the Bering Strait area. Recap of tonight's weather. We do have a low pressure system moving through the western portion of the Bering Sea, bringing rain showers throughout the Bering, Aleutian Islands, and Alaska Peninsula. Transitioning to a rain and snow mix as we get up by the St. Lawrence Island area and up much of the west coast. Up along the Arctic coastline, we are expecting snow overnight, as well as snow through much of the Brooks Range, with heavier snow in the southeastern portion of the Brooks Range, accompanied by winds that would create some blowing snow conditions as well, where we have a winter weather advisory out for snow and blowing snow till 10 a.m. on Friday, and that will impact the Dalton Highway area. Down in the central and eastern portions of the interior, rain and snow mix. Low-lying areas will see more of the rain. Higher elevations will see the snow. Rain throughout south central Alaska as low pressure remains out over the Gulf of Alaska, and rain for the Panhandle as well. As we move into Friday, with low out over the Gulf of Alaska, continuing to see rain for the Panhandle, South Central, and Kodiak Island areas. Central and eastern portions of the interior also expecting to see rain, and then rain and snow mix along the Arctic coastline with more snow in the Brooks Range. For the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, continuing to see that northerly winds bringing rain showers throughout the area, as well as the Alaska Peninsula. And then finally on Saturday, northerly winds continuing for the Bering Sea and Aleutians, more rain showers on the way, with rain coming into the Alaska Peninsula as well. Our low out over the Gulf will push to the west towards the Bristol Bay area, bringing more rain throughout southwest Alaska, as well as continued rain for the North Gulf Coast, South Central Alaska, and the Panhandle. Up through the interior, some lighter showers for the central and eastern locations, and continuing to be a rain and snow mix along the Arctic coastline with more snow in the Brooks Range. We have another system coming in that's going to bring some stronger winds to the Gulf of Alaska area on Sunday, as well as heavier rainfall for the Panhandle area.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.